Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Pick Up the Mic. You're joined today with Jeffrey and Inoshka as usual. Do you want to say hello, Jeffrey and Inoshka?
Hi guys.
Hi everyone.
Very nice. And we have a guest speaker today named Selma Fitzwee. Hopefully I said that right.
Yeah, you did.
Perfect. Thank you so much for coming to speak on our podcast.
No worries.
And you are our second guest.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, you take the front seats to our new endeavour. And so to start, we would love to know a bit about yourself to see how you're doing. You can tell our listeners a little bit about yourself.
Well, my name's Selma. We've already covered that. I'm 18 years old and I'm currently a student. And I plan to go to uni in September of 2021. So yeah, that's about it, really.
Thank you very much for that, Selma. It was a really good introduction. So yeah, let's get into it. So I guess our first official question is, in the last year or so, the idea of BAME representation has definitely popped up a lot more than previous years. And I guess the first question we want to ask you today is, why is BAME representation such an important thing? Why is it so important?
I feel like overall, it's a lot more important when people are like a lot younger, because I think you're quite impressionable to your environment and things around you. So I do think that if you're not seeing a lot of that as you're growing up, it will have a much bigger impact on you, like as you grow older. But I feel like, especially now, that I feel like even when I don't see like BAME representation in places, because I'm aware of like what's going on, it doesn't really affect me as much. But I do think it's very important, especially as like children, like Black and brown children are growing up. I do think it's very important that they see themselves being represented.
No, definitely. I definitely agree. And I think that's one of the things that people, especially in like the last year, have said, people growing up with like a diverse range of people and a diverse, background of whether it's culture or religion or race. It does help you to, open your thinking. So yeah, thank you very much for that. That is really good.
No worries.
Thank you, Selma, so much for that answer. So following on from Jeffrey's question, I just want to ask you that as somebody from the BAME community, how does a lack of representation affect you?
I feel like, as I said before, I feel like when I was younger, I feel like it affected me a lot more, because obviously, like, you look around you and what you're seeing and all of that type of stuff. And if you're not seeing yourself represented, it's a lot harder to picture yourself in certain spaces. But then I feel like there's a flip side of it, because I feel like when you're younger as well, you do think you can do anything and all of that stuff. And I didn't really think that my race would stand in the way of that. But I do feel like now, as I'm a lot older and as I'm like reading more and like learning more stuff about it and all of that stuff, I don't know, I feel like when I see the lack of representation, like I'm very aware as to why that is. And like in terms of the media and all of that stuff, like I'm very like aware to like how like they work regarding like Black and brown people. So I'm not as what's the word?
You're
not as taken back by it, kind of. Yeah.
So you were saying that when you're younger, you think like the sky is the limit and nothing really kind of clouds your vision. And then you're saying as you get older, you kind of understand why. But do you not feel that it holds you back a little bit, even when you're older?
No, definitely. Yeah. No, definitely. I do think, of course, like the world we live in, it's like equality's it hasn't yet become like the normalized thing. So I do think, of course, like anybody who's like from an ethnic minority is going to hold you back. Like, especially, of course, if you're like a woman on top of that, it's going to hold you back. Or like if you're part of the LGBT community, it's going to also hold you back. So like, I definitely think like that is the case. And I think I'm like very aware of that. I know, I just feel like personally when I'm like, when I'm planning things or when I'm trying to like get into something new, I just try, even though I'm aware that it will hold me back, I just try and not make that the main like issue or like the main, do you know what I mean? The main things, and I feel like
everything.
Because then otherwise I feel like that I'm already, even though I'm already like going to be put steps backwards, I feel like I'm just going to put myself even further back if I try and like get into my head about it.
Yeah, I completely understand. That's a really good answer. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Selma, for explaining about your experience with representation. And as we know, representation can help add perspectives that aren't seen and add voices that aren't heard to so many people, which gives us the ability to bring about a positive change where we can add to society. But also, I wanted to talk about the process of bringing equality in by taking away, and not taking away the voices of people that are underrepresented, but taking away harmful messages that have been encoded into our education and institutions. So I study psychology, and in psychology, we learn now, it's part of our education, that people used IQ levels, and people still sometimes try to use IQ levels to try and generalize populations, generalize races, which we know is a scientific fact of being absolutely insane, but people still do it. So how can we bring these into the light, and then how can we sever these corrupted old beliefs that are passed down to communities is a question that a lot of people are asking. But basically, what we were wondering today is how can decolonizing education help encourage BAME representation?
So I think, ironically, in order to make people aware of how integrated certain beliefs and ignorant beliefs are within the education system, I feel like it takes just educating people on the matter, and just when we're for example, in terms of history and stuff in schools, giving students the option to learn about other topics, especially I feel in terms of Black history, there's a lot more to it than just slavery. So teaching students more about what happened in the past, before all of that. I feel usually, especially when I was in school, whenever we'd learn about Black history, that was always the focal point was slavery, or it would be a day on Martin Luther King, but that was it. So I think a lot of it is to do with just providing a wide range for people to choose from, and not just having the same set topics which don't actually represent Black history as a whole. I feel I've kind of taken a run onto Black history. Yeah.
No, that's perfect. And I think a point that maybe you're trying to make as well is that Black history isn't just slavery. We can't think
exactly.
Think, hey, they were slaves and now they're not, or hey, these people were, you can't just take a group of people and say that's their only history. That's just the most thing ever. So yeah, I think even though educating about slavery can help understand what happened in the past, there's groups of people all over the world who have such rich, deep histories with massive amounts of different thoughts, different philosophies, different ideas, different ways of living that have gone on, for thousands of years and generations before, to take just a small snippet of history and to play that on repeat all the time isn't always the healthiest thing.
Yeah, no, 100%. I agree with that point, 100%.
Wow, yeah, thank you very much for that, Selma. That was a really good answer. And I definitely think decolonizing education, especially, what we've seen in the last year, people have said that decolonizing education will help representation, like you said, not only for people from BAME backgrounds, but also in the Jewish community as well, talking about the whole of Jewish history and not just focusing solely on the Holocaust or, these atrocities and histories that happened to these groups, because they had history before then and they've had history since. So yeah, I think it definitely is very important to be talking about these, these other periods in history, like the King of Mali, which, at some point was supposedly, and I think even currently to today is counted as the richest man in the world. But we'll just have to wait and see if Elon Musk decides to invest in some other crazy tech. Or like Sam said before, he's looking to space. So who knows? He might suddenly decide to get more income. But yeah, speaking about representation, you know, while, like we said, you know, doing it from like the educational basis is very good. And, you know, even government intervention and, you know, promoting schemes and, you know, activities to help promote BAME representation is very good. What can we as individuals do to promote BAME representation? I think that's one of the things that, you know, people might not be sure of what they can do. So just what could some of our listeners do today to help promote BAME representation, whether it's in their field or just within where they work?
I think like an important thing is to like not take up like space where it doesn't concern you. Like I feel like, especially in terms of when discussing issues around Black and brown people, of course, like advocate for like equality and all of that stuff, but I feel like let those people speak on their experiences and like without interference or without interruption. And like, oh, when you were speaking about the schemes and stuff, what I've realized is I feel like in a lot of places, even like my sister was speaking about, like in like work and stuff, whenever it's like what's the word, like discrimination interventions and like how to teach people how to like not discriminate others, a lot of the time it's people who aren't like Black or brown who are like teaching these classes. So I feel like in terms of like that as well, it might be a lot, like if you obviously don't have that experience, like, and it might be a lot harder for you to like, you know, teach somebody. So I think one of the main things is just not taking up spaces where it doesn't concern you, I think.
No, 100%. I definitely agree. And I think that's why people are saying like in the last year or so, that's where, you know, a lot of complications have occurred because, you know, there was and I think that's what people are saying about the black squares that, you know, everyone was posting last year.
Oh gosh.
And like that had its own, like, you know, it started off as just to be a day to remind people, you know, like just take a time off social media. Like we live in a world where, you know, there was the murder of George Floyd and, you know, all these different like police brutality incidents in America. And then, you know, it was just supposed to be a day of reflection, you know, just take this time off to just post, you know, you're posting Black Square to be like, think about it. And then it became like its own thing where people were just putting out black squares. And then there was this whole thing of, you know, people just putting no text, no explanation for the black square, but we're just going to put up a black square. Even like organizations as well. There was like, you started to see like organizations just tweeting out a black square and it was just like Blackout Tuesday. And then it was only until like later on, you saw people saying like, no, I'm not putting up a black square and just putting a hashtag because it's a trend, because people are doing it. There were people like putting up like Martin Luther King quotes or like other quotes to represent like, this is why, or even people, even if they put up like a black square, they were just like, we need to stop like police brutality against Black people in America or African Americans. We need to use like this day to like really reflect. And I think that's what it was supposed to be. It's just supposed to be a day of reflection. And, you know, like you said, it was then turned into its own thing. And I know some people said that they felt like some companies were using, even to this day, are using like Black Lives Matter as like a, not necessarily like a buyout, but like using it to promote themselves and be like, oh, you know, we're doing all these changes. But that was one of the things that, you know, as a Black person, I did think about, like, have all these organizations done the stuff that they said they were going to do? So yeah, no, definitely, I definitely agree with you. Like giving people the space to lead on their experience. You know, if as a person who isn't of color or isn't a part of the BAME community, you're leading these groups. You know, giving people the space to say their honest opinions and experiences. And I know that they, at Brunel specifically, they had like a focus group about that. And that was one of the things that was highlighted, that, you know, this is a safe space. Feel free to like tell your opinions and say, you know, your experience of racism or discrimination at Brunel. So yeah, no, 100%, I agree with you. Giving people, and I think especially like letting them know that it's not just a trend. Like Black Lives Matter isn't a trend. You don't need to just put the hashtag in the post and that's it. Like doing the simple things of like supporting your Black friends, even if, you know, I I know for health reasons, I couldn't go out because I live with my family and I don't want to put them in a vulnerable position. But last year, with the protests, I was still putting things in my Instagram feed and signing petitions and donating to charities because while I might, or I know there's some people who might not feel comfortable going out to do protests. There are still other things you can do. So doing things like signing petitions, even like having a conversation with your friend, an open conversation, because they might not be able to they might feel like they can't talk to anyone about their experiences. So yeah, I think those are a few things that are just really important to raise from this question that I want people to take away with.
Yeah, thanks, Selma. That was a really interesting answer that you had there. So we just spoke about what we as individuals can do to promote the BAME community and BAME representation. But what would you say to somebody who isn't part of the BAME community but still wants to promote the community? Like, what one piece of advice would you give to them?
I'd say, like, whatever you're going to do it from like a genuine place. Like, don't do anything out of wanting approval from like social media or like people around you. I think if you actively want to help, then do it because you want to and not because you want to receive anything in return. But I'd just say, like, I don't know, like, just make a cautious like effort. I feel like now, even like myself, like when I'm like shopping and stuff like that, I do like actively try to look into like Black and like Asian like own brands, like especially if they're on a lot of like a smaller scale, like I do try and support those. So yeah, I just think it's just like making like caution decisions in like everyday life, and like if you see something which isn't right, speaking up on it. And yeah,
that's a really good answer. And it also kind of links back to the fact that all these BAME groups are underrepresented, and they're discriminated against. There's a lack of opportunities, and as we were speaking about before, there's an absence of role models. So any kind of promotion from people outside the BAME community will definitely help, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I think speaking up is like the main one, like especially if you're not from like a BAME community, I don't think you'll receive, your voice is going to be heard to like a wider audience. So I think
yes, exactly,
speaking up is a big thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add to that, that, I think with anything, whether it's, to do with racism, discrimination, sexism, they have said, like, if you, and I think, in the last couple of weeks, not even last week, in the last year, we've seen different things of, there was the murder of Sarah Everland, and there was also, the things with George Floyd as well, the increase in Asian hate crime. And that's one of the things that people did say, like, even if you're not a part of the group, don't feel like you can't help support the group. I think, like you said, Selma, while using social media is like a good way to start, like, have those conversations. And I think that's what people say. They are difficult conversations to have, but it's better to have a difficult conversation and you bring about change, and you change, whether it's an individual's life, an organization structure, or things like that, than it just being unsaid. And I think one example of this is with Serena Williams' husband. I think he's either in charge of Reddit or Snapchat. I don't remember. It's a tech company.
Oh, it's Reddit.
Yeah, Reddit. Thank you. And he left his position. He left his position because he said he feels like a person of color should be in that position. And even like last year, we saw, people in TV shows in animated TV shows, that is, who were like, they were people who weren't Black or weren't Asian voicing these characters. And they said, after what's happened, I can't play this person anymore. It's not right. And I think stuff like that, like allowing these if you're I wouldn't say overrepresented group, but if you're a group that has that position of power, using that to allow yourself to support these underrepresented groups is like, it's the first and best step to help, to help improve diversity and increase representation. So yeah, thank you very much for that, Selma.
No worries.
So this episode's MC of the month is going to be the UCL Institution of Education. So this might throw people off because it's not an individual this time. But the reason why we've picked the UCL Institute of Education is because they do a lot of work to highlight, gaps, whether it's in education or underrepresented groups in education. They actually do help to explain these, like, why these factors, like why things happen. So, like, for example, the pay gap within men and women, in different fields. They do research on that. But specifically linking to, this episode's theme of like BAME representation, they released an article in December 2020. They released research, from December 2020 that basically said, like, in the whole of let me just, I think it was either England or the UK. Almost half of the schools have no BAME members of staff, have no BAME teachers. Even where there is like diversity among staff, the same thing of like what we said before about senior leadership within these schools being made up of just majority people who aren't a part of the BAME community. And this has basically meant that, like Selma said before about people who are, from BAME groups, going through school and never seeing their background represented. Even within that, they've said that, their research has showed that people from BAME backgrounds they described it as like a hidden workload of tackling racial inequalities in schools, which has meant that, they feel like burnt out, they feel super tired. And yeah, it's basically, this research has been really good because it's highlighted that, we've spoken about like decolonizing education before, and it's highlighted this idea of, is the education system really making changes? And, they've said that, obviously there still has been an increase, though be it small, in the portion of BAME teachers over the last decade. There is still a significant gap between the portion of from BAME students in schools and BAME teachers. So they're our MC for this month, because we believe that, the research they're doing is pivotal to helping to show that there is a real need for change. And, they actually, hopefully will be able to help implement these changes on whether it's a local, national or regional scale. So, we look forward to seeing any more from that. But feel free, they've got a website, I believe. So feel free to check out the UCL Institute of Education. We've now come to the end of the episode. So thank you very much for everyone for listening. Thank you very much, Selma, for being on this episode. You've provided our listeners with, vital and important information that they need to be aware of.
No worries, anytime. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you. And so I guess, this is the end. So thank you everyone for listening. We hope you look forward to our next episode, which will be coming out shortly. So keep an eye out. And if you haven't already listened to our previous episodes, they are also either above or below. I'm not too sure, but you'll see them when you're listening to this podcast. So thanks everyone, and we hope you have a great day.